My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 50 and I live alone in a small rented place in Miami by choice, not necessity. That choice taught me who my family really was when they thought I had nothing. My sister Tessa has always been the favourite, the one with the glossy posts and the loud stories. I am the quiet one who shows up on time and leaves without a fuss. At our parents' 45th anniversary, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers and pressed linens. I wore my plain navy dress, touched up the scuffed heels, and set a modest bottle of wine near the centrepiece. When the salads landed, Tessa leaned in and said loud enough for the table, "Still living in that rat hole," forks paused. My parents looked past me. No one said my name. I set my water glass down and let the silence do its work. What they did not know was simple. 10 years ago, I took a divorce settlement and turned it into something steady. 2 rentals, bonds, index funds, a cash cushion no one could see. It sits at 3, 4 million now, wrapped in a plan I built quietly, page by page. I did not argue that night. I did not need to. The next time we sat at a table together, I would put something heavier than words in the centre. What happened after I did is the part they never saw coming. My sister asked loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Are you still in that rat hole?" Knives and forks stopped mid-air. I set my glass down, and for the first time, I heard how loud silence can be. The chandelier light was cool and clean. The tablecloth was smooth as a sheet pulled tight. The air unit hummed under the band playing soft jazz. My name card sat at an angle next to a heavy menu with raised letters. Condensation slid down my water glass and made a faint ring on the linen. We were in a beachfront hotel ballroom for the 45th anniversary of Linda and Bob. Their table was closer to the stage. Mine was near the service aisle. That small distance said enough. I wore a plain navy dress that did not ask for attention. Tessa wore a black dress that held its lines like it knew who was in charge. She had an audience before the salads even landed. She talked about a penthouse for a tech chief, a wall of winestone brought in from Italy, a timeline only she could hold together. The couple to her right laughed on cue. My mother glanced up at her with pride that did not need words. A guest across from me asked where I lived. I said North Miami and left it there. Tessa did not. She turned toward me with a bright smile and a raised voice. It was not a question. The word rat made a few people grin and then look down at their plates as if that could make them invisible. A server paused behind me with a tray and did not move. My mother adjusted her napkin. Bob cleared his throat. No one told Tessa to stop. No one told me I did not have to take it. I pressed my fingertips to the glass until the skin went white, and then let go. I straightened the edge of my napkin. I took one short breath and counted it. I did not answer. Silence kept its shape. Linda leaned toward me and spoke in a tone she used for weather talk. "Maybe it is time you found a place that is easier to manage." She said something more suitable now that it is just you. Bob nodded like he was closing a meeting. "Look at your sister," he said. "She sets goals. She moves up. You could learn a thing or two." People at the table shifted in their chairs. I could feel the heat rise in my face and then leave, as if it had no place to settle. I kept my voice low. "You said it loud enough," I told Tessa, and I picked up my water again. The band changed songs. A spoon clinked in a cup somewhere behind us. The master of ceremonies went to the mic and asked the room to raise a glass to 45 years. Chairs scraped, glasses lifted. At our table, a few hands reached across to touch rims. Mine did not meet another. I lifted it anyway. The chandelier broke into 100 small lights on the surface of the water in my glass. I set it down. The ring it left grew into a faint oval as the linen drank it. A woman next to me asked Tessa about a designer she follows online. Tessa smiled and kept talking in quick, clean lines. Linda typed something into her phone with her lips pressed together, then tucked it face down. Bob checked his watch. I looked at the place setting in front of me and pushed the dessert plate away when it arrived a perfect round of sugar I did not want. I could have left. I could have told the whole table that I was fine, that I was not stuck, that the apartment I chose was not a punishment. Instead, I watched the room and let myself feel how familiar this had become. The far seat, the soft dig, the smile that asks me to take the joke and play along. I did not cry. I did not argue. I made a small, private promise. My fingers brushed the edge of the invitation in my bag, the same cream card that brought me here. It felt heavier than paper. I caught my reflection in the water glass and did not look away. The band ended another song. The server moved again. People laughed the way people laugh when they want the moment to pass. I finished the water, placed the glass exactly on the faint ring it had left and pushed my chair in. I had been waiting for this moment for years. I drove home with the window cracked and no radio on. The road noise was steady and simple. In my kitchen, the light was warm and low. I set my keys in the wooden tray and rinsed the lipstick ring from my water glass. The apartment was small and clean. I liked that it asked nothing from me. I pulled the chair out from the table and knelt by the cabinet. The bottom drawer stuck a little like it always did, and then gave. Inside was the folder with the coloured tabs along the edge. I set it on the table, smoothed the cover, and opened to the first tab. Account summaries, balances, notes in my careful handwriting. I read the number I already knew. About 3.4 million across accounts and property. Nothing flashy. Index funds and high-grade bonds. A cash cushion for a year of living. 2 rentals in quiet buildings with 12-month leases. The rent hit on the first. Vacancies had been short. I turned a page and found the photocopy of my old bank ID, the one with the stiff smile, and the hair I used to pin back too tight. I was good at rules. I was good at being prepared. 10 years ago, Marcus and I had sat at a long table with our lawyers and divided a life. He was fair. I was tired. We signed. What he left me then was about 3 million, and a map for how to hold it steady. I followed the map. I did not chase tips or headlines. I rebalanced once a year. I kept repairs up on the rentals and replaced a water heater before it broke. The money grew a little because I let time do its work and I did mine. I slid the folder aside and took out a smaller envelope, the one with a key wrapped in a napkin. The safe deposit box key had weight in my palm. I held it for a breath and then put it back. I knew what was inside. Copies of deeds. A simple letter I wrote to myself the year after the divorce. I did not need to read it to remember the point. Stay steady. I opened another tab with notes from a different kind of meeting, not a legal one. A call with my mother from years back. I had told her I was doing fine and that I had made a good plan. I did not brag. I did not give numbers. She said I should be realistic, that I should not get ahead of myself, that a woman alone ought to think smaller. The words landed like a lid. I stopped talking. After that, I let the family believe I was scraping by. I kept my rent low. I drove the same used sedan and paid cash for maintenance. I wore simple clothes and did not explain myself. I wanted to know who would sit with me when there was nothing to take pride in. The answer was hard and clear. The checks from Bob arrived some holidays with notes about learning from Tessa. Links from Tessa pinged my phone with listings for units that were easy to manage for someone on her own. Calls from Linda were full of her schedule and Tessa's schedule. When she asked about me, it was a single line at the end. I did not correct them. I folded my days small and kept my head down and told myself this was a test. I turned back to the numbers. The income from the rentals was steady. Taxes were set aside in a separate sub-account, so April did not surprise me. My cash bucket was enough to cover 12 months of bills if everything went wrong at once. The notes looked like a checklist because that is how I think. When I closed my eyes, I could still see the ring of water on the linen from earlier and hear the room go quiet after Tessa's voice cut the air. I lifted the bank ID by its corner and studied the face in the photo. Careful, to a fault, I thought. Maybe that had served me. Maybe it had also kept me hidden too long. I slid the ID back into its sleeve and stacked the papers in order tabs lined up like a row of small flags. The light over the stove gave the folder a soft edge. I took out a blank page and wrote 3 lines in pencil. Call Rachel. See a house. Do one useful thing with all of this. The words looked plain and solid. I like them that way. I put the pencil down, closed the folder, and returned it to the bottom drawer. The wood scraped home. I stood up and felt the room change just a shade. It was time to stop playing small. I drove to the cafe by the beach with the window cracked and the radio off. The morning had that clean salt smell that lives in Miami. Inside the cafe, the grinder gave a steady low buzz and the barista called out names over the steam. I took the small table by the window and watched the palm fronds tap the glass. Nina came in with her tote on her shoulder and a hair clip that never seems to hold all her hair. She hugged me quick and read my face like she always does. "Rough night," she said. I nodded. "I am done shrinking," I said. "I am not fighting with them. I am changing the plan." We ordered 2 coffees. The mugs were thick white ceramic with a thin crack at each handle, the kind of crack that does not break, but stays as a line you can feel with your thumb. I took out my small notebook and a pen. 3 lines, I told her. First, I will set up a revocable living trust and a pour-over will. I want a no-contest clause. I want a video record of my intent and a clean evaluation from a doctor so no one can claim I am not clear. I want a durable power of attorney and a healthcare proxy with your name on them and a HIPAA release so you can talk to doctors if needed. I will keep my beneficiaries off the family tree. Nina leaned in and asked the kind of questions people ask when they are actually listening. Why now? What is the risk we are solving? I told her I could hear the room last night when no one spoke up. Silence told me more than a speech would have. I am not going to wait for permission. She said, "Good. What else?" "Second, I want a house that fits what I can do," I said. Not a trophy. A place with light in a quiet neighbourhood, maybe Biscayne Park, maybe North Bay Village. Budget is clear. I will buy in cash, but I will not drain everything. I will keep the 2 rental units and the cash cushion. The house is a home only. I will not try to run programs out of it. She smiled. You sound like you. You, third. I want to do one useful thing with this money. Not a splash. Something steady. I told her about Harbour House, about small classes for resumes, and basic tech about 1 night a week of money talks that skip the jargon about a small stipend for childcare so mothers can show up. I want to support it with a donor-advised fund so the grants roll on a schedule and not just when I feel bad or feel rich. Start, small, measure, adjust. Nina nodded and added 2 notes. Find 3 mentors we trust and set a cap on each pilot so it does not sprawl. I wrote it down in 2 neat lines. My phone vibrated on the table. A message preview from a family number lit the screen. I did not open it. I turned the phone face down and scented it on the napkin. 1 sentence for all future calls and texts, I said. For anything about money, please speak with my attorney. Nina laughed once with her eyes. That will save you hours. Do it now, she said, and pointed at the card I had tucked in my notebook. I pulled out Rachel Ortiz's card and dialed. The grinder lifted in volume just as the call picked up. Rachel answered with her calm office voice, and I told her what I needed. A meeting this week if she had room. A trust with a no contest clause. A pour-over will. A video of my intent. Durable power of attorney and healthcare proxy with Nina Park named. A HEAP IA release. Notes to my banks about not accepting any outside power of attorney without going through her first. She said she could see me Thursday morning and that she would email a checklist for documents to bring. The call was short and plain, and it felt like opening a window. I read the time back to her and thanked her. When I hung up, I wrote Thursday at 10 and circled it twice. Nina watched my hand move and let out a breath. "There you are," she said. I felt it too. Not a big thrill, more like a steady click into gear. We finished our coffee. I traced the small crack in the mug handle with my thumb and set the cup down so the crack faced me. I tucked the card under the napkin to keep it in place. Outside the door, the wind pushed in and the glass rattled a little in its frame. I checked my calendar and saw the new block appear. I did not take a picture of it. I did not text anyone about it. It was for me. Nina stood and we walked to the door together. I told her I would send the document list tonight and that I would see a realtor after I met with Rachel. She squeezed my arm. "Proud of you," she said. "I am not trying to make anyone proud," I said. "I am trying to make this make sense." We stepped into the bright air, and I felt lighter by an inch, the kind of difference only you can measure from the inside. We stepped into the bright air, and I felt lighter by an inch, the kind of difference only you can measure from the inside. 2 days later, I sat in Rachel Ortiz's conference room with a glass wall and a long wooden table. The air was cool and even. A small scanner hummed on a side credenza. She set a stack of papers in front of me and a heavy pen that felt like it wanted to stay where it landed. We started with the trust. Rachel read the name of the Revocable Living Trust, the date and the roles. I am the grantor and the trustee. Nina is the successor trustee with a corporate co-trustee, ready if needed. We listed what moves into the trust now and what will be titled to it when I buy a house. Investment accounts the 2 rental condos my cash account. The pour-over will gather anything I miss into the trust later. Beneficiaries are set to fund a donor-advised fund at my death, with a letter of intent that points grants toward Harbour House on a schedule. No one in my family is named to inherit. Then the no contest clause. Rachel explained it in plain words. If anyone challenges the plan without good cause or pushes me to change it through pressure or a bad faith court filing, they are cut out. She placed a red tab on that page and looked at me. I nodded. We recorded a short video will. She set her phone on a small tripod and asked 5 questions that showed I knew what I was signing and that no one was forcing me. I said my name, the date, the plan, and that I made it freely. My voice was steady. She tapped stop and saved it to a secure folder. She also booked a neuropsych evaluation with an independent doctor for next week. Not because I doubted myself, but because I wanted a clean record if anyone ever tried to claim I did not know what I was doing. She added the appointment to my calendar while I watched. We moved to medical and decision helpers. Durable power of attorney in case I need help with finances later. Healthcare proxy naming Nina so doctors can listen to her if I cannot speak. A HEPA release so she can see records if needed. The notary stepped in, checked my ID, and pressed a raised seal onto each page that called for it. The sound of the stamp was soft but final. Rachel turned to security. We called my banks from the room. I read verification codes back to the reps and asked for 2-factor authentication by text and voice. I enrolled a voice print where the bank offered it. We added a note in every profile that no power of attorney or third-party authority is to be accepted unless confirmed through Rachel Ortiz at her office. We listed a trusted contact as Nina with no rights to move money. Rachel kept minutes of each call, and slid copies into a binder labelled with the trust name. The scanner hummed as each signed page became a clean digital file. We talked about the donor-advised fund while the prints finished. I chose a sponsor with simple fees. We set a quarterly grant plan to Harbour House so the support is predictable and not a burst that fades. Reports go to me and then to the file. Anonymous to the public if I choose, but open to the non-profit so they can plan. When the stack was ready, she walked me through the signatures. She touched the margin with one finger and waited. I signed my name in slow, clear letters. The pen pressed a dark line that did not skip. I did not rush. We kept going. Trust agreement pour over will clause, pages, powers, proxies, releases. The notary sealed the last one and handed me a small envelope with certified copies. Rachel closed the binder and clicked the rings shut. She gave me a short checklist of account title changes and a list of which deeds to retitle and how. I will record those with her office and keep copies in a safe deposit box and at home. She asked if I had questions. I looked at the neat stack, the red tabs, the calm room, and felt my shoulders drop a notch. No questions, I said. We shook hands. After I signed, I stood taller. The next morning, I called Cara Walsh and asked to see houses in Biscayne Park and North Bay Village. The light in my kitchen was soft, and I had already put the trust binder away. I wanted a place that felt like daylight lived there. Cara met me outside the first address, a mid-century place with big curb appeal. The yard was tight and the front door swung open to a scent that tried too hard. The floors were polished to a shine that threw me back a little. The staging was perfect, almost like a set. I walked through the rooms and listened for the quiet of a normal day. I did not hear it. We moved on. The second house sat on a calm corner with palms that had learned the wind. Inside, sunlight pushed in through wide windows and ran in long bands across the wood floor. The kitchen was simple and clean. The bedrooms were not large, but they felt honest. I stood still and let my shoulders drop. I could make coffee here without waking the whole street. Cara handed me a folder with maintenance records, roof age service reports, air system, water heater, electrical panel notes. She walked me through current property taxes and a fair guess for insurance and utilities. She tapped the stair rail and it gave a solid sound. I wrote small notes in my pocket notebook. We talked price. I told her I wanted to buy in cash at about 1.45 million, with a fast close and a proper inspection. The offer would ask the seller to handle a few small items that came up in the report. Title had to be clean. We sent the offer from her tablet in the driveway. I did not add anything dramatic. That afternoon, the seller accepted. We moved through inspection and found a short list that the seller fixed before closing. The money schedule was clear. Funds would leave the account that was already inside the trust. My emergency cash stayed in place. The 2 rental units stayed as they were. I signed the binder of closing papers in a quiet room, and the notary placed a raised seal where needed. When the key slid across the table to me, it felt heavy and real. I walked into the house for the first time as the owner and stood by the front windows. Cool air came out of the vents. The light moved across the floor in a slow change that made sense to my body. I set the new key ring on the entry shelf and listened to the house breathe. This was a home, not a stage, not a message. I wrote a short note on a scrap and stuck it to the fridge with a plain magnet. Call leasing for Harbour House space. Shortlist neighbourhoods. The house would be only a house. The work would live in a small commercial spot near a bus line so people could get there without trouble. I booked a haircut at a small shop a few blocks away. The stylist asked what I wanted. I told her shoulder length and easy. She cut in clean passes and I watched hair fall and land on the black cape. Back home, I opened the closet and made clear choices. I kept the clothes that truly fit my life and boxed others for donation. The hangers looked like they could breathe for the first time. I did not buy a truck of new furniture. I moved in what I needed most: a firm bed, a small table with 2 chairs, a kettle, 2 mugs, 1 lamp with a warm bulb. I wanted to live with the house a few weeks before I decided where to put money. The kettle clicked off. I poured water and stood by the window with both hands around the mug. The floorboard under my left heel had a tiny squeak. I made a note to ask a handyman to look at it. I took a photo of the sun line on the wood and sent it to Nina. She texted back a heart and told me to breathe. I did. I walked the block at dusk and counted the porches with small lights on. People waved without stopping me to talk. Back inside, I made a list on paper and folded it into my wallet. Update insurance. Schedule the locksmith for new cylinders. Pick a simple dining set for 6. Keep the guest room empty until I know how I want to use it. Before bed, I stood in the kitchen with the lights off. The street light outside threw a steady square onto the counter. It felt like a promise I made to myself and could finally keep. In the morning, I brewed coffee, answered one email from Rachel with scanned documents she needed for retitling, and then opened my calendar. I created a new event and named it plainly. Dinner at my place? I set a date 2 weeks out and blocked the evening. I will write the invitations by hand and send them in the mail. I invited them to dinner. I mailed the cards and set the table on the back porch as the light cooled. A white cloth, 4 plain plates, glasses that caught the last sun. I kept the trust binder in the side cabinet near my chair and set my new keyring on a wooden tray within reach. Linda and Bob arrived first, with the kind of smiles people wear to a church lobby. Linda touched the door frame with her fingers as if to test it. "This is lovely," she said. "Is this a friend's place, dear?" Bob scanned the room and walked to the window. "Must be nice in good weather," he said. "How long are you renting this?" I did not answer the question he meant. Tessa came 10 minutes later. Heels clicked across the wood. She hugged me lightly without letting our bodies meet and took in the room the way she takes in a client brief. "Nice lines," she said. We sat. I brought out a simple salad and a dish of roasted vegetables, and 1 bottle of wine. We made short talk about traffic and a new restaurant, and a client she had almost landed. Linda asked if I had found a new apartment yet and if this place came furnished. Bob asked about property taxes like he was making polite conversation with a banker. Tessa tilted her head at the view through the palms. "So, who is the lucky owner?" she said. "How did you swing all this on your own? Did you take a loan? Did someone help with a down payment?" Knives and forks slowed and then stopped. I set my fork down and folded the napkin once. "I will answer what I can," I said. "I will not discuss what I do not need to." I stood long enough to open the cabinet door and pulled the trust binder free. I sat back down, placed my keyring in the centre of the table, and let the metal rest there. 2 breaths passed. Then I opened the binder to the tab labelled beneficiaries. A pencil line sat under the words "No contest clause" on the facing page. "This house is titled to my trust," I said. "No one in the family is a beneficiary. That will not change." The table went still. The air from the fan brushed the edge of the cloth. Tessa stared at the page like it might flicker and change the words for her. "You are cutting us out," she said, her voice small and sharp at the same time. "You think you are above us now because you bought a view." Linda reached for her water and missed it by an inch. "We are family," she said, her eyes wet. "You do not have to be harsh." Bob leaned forward and set his elbows on the table, like a man at the start of a negotiation. "Family, first," he said. "We should sit down and make a plan together. A family fund. Safer if we all look out for each other." I closed the binder and put my hand on top of it. I do not pool money with family, I said. Questions about my estate go to my attorney. My plans are set. Please respect that. Tessa laughed with no humour in it. You cannot keep everything to yourself and expect us to be fine, she said. There are medical bills. There are real needs. I did not raise my voice. I am not debating this at dinner, I said. I took my keys back from the centre of the table and set them on the tray. I poured more water and asked if anyone wanted dessert. No one answered. A minute later, Linda nodded as if she had decided something only she could hear and lifted her purse. Thank you for having us, she said. The words sounded like they had to push through cotton. Bob stood and gave the room one last measuring look, the way he looks at a car lot. He shook my hand and told me to call him if I needed advice. At the door, Tessa lingered. She lifted her chin a fraction, the way she does when she's about to walk into a client meeting. We will talk soon, she said, and gave me a thin smile that did not reach her eyes. Her heels clicked down the path one by one. I closed the door and stood with my palm on the wood until the house felt quiet again. The binder lay where I left it, the tab still open, the small pencil line under those two words. I closed it and set it on the shelf. My phone buzzed. Linda. She said she had been thinking that she was sorry for any hard edges at dinner, that family should not let small things grow into big things. She wanted to come by with a pie I liked as a kid and talk about how we could make everyone feel good again. I kept my tone even. I am fine, Mum. If the talk is about money or my plans, please work through my attorney. She said, of course, and then added that she only wanted me safe, that women alone should not have to manage so much. After we hung up, a text from Bob arrived. He wrote about a family investment fund as a smart way to keep assets safe and taxes lower. He offered to bring a few simple papers to sign if I was up for it. I wrote one sentence back. Please put proposals in writing and meet me at my attorney's office. An email from Tessa landed before lunch. Subject line smooth as a billboard. Independent advisor I trust for you. She praised his track record and said he could create a plan that let me relax. At the far right of the header, a small CC peeked out. Bob Brooks, Tessa Brooks. I took a screenshot and saved it to a new folder with today's date. I read the body. The phrases matched what Linda and Bob had said. Family fund, temporary power to handle small tasks, safe for a woman on her own. I replied that I would be happy to speak at my lawyer's office and that the advisor should bring a full fee schedule, a conflict of interest disclosure, and a signed fiduciary duty letter stating he worked only for me. I also asked for no copies of my ID and no signatures to be collected at the first meeting. He wrote back that of course he was independent and that he looked forward to meeting. The next day we sat in Rachel Ortiz's conference room. Rachel began by sliding a short form across the table. Please sign this fiduciary commitment, she said, and list every fee and kickback you receive. The advisor smiled and reached for a different folder. I mirrored his smile and Air played his email onto the room screen. The header stretched wide. The CC field sat large and obvious. Independent means no CC, I said. You can sign this now and we can talk, or we can stop here. He flushed and said he needed to confirm the scope with Tessa before he could sign anything that limited his flexibility. Rachel ended the meeting. Outside the room, I saved the audio from my phone recorder and mailed it to myself and to Rachel. I filed the screenshots, the calendar entry, and a short list of the exact words he used. Facts only. Rachel drafted a cease and desist to hold in case he contacted me again outside counsel. She also updated my trust language to clarify that anyone who pressures or conspires to pressure me about my estate is excluded from all benefits. At home, a letter from Linda waited in my mailbox. Blue ink, careful loops. She wanted to see the house and maybe talk to a friend of Bob's who was a doctor and could help me feel at ease. I texted back one line. Please, email, to schedule any visit and keep all money matters with my attorney. Bob sent another message that evening suggesting a quick sit-down at a cafe so he could show me a draft of the family fund idea. I did not meet him. I asked him to send it as a PDF to Rachel. He did not. I slept well for a few hours and then woke to the soft chime of my doorbell. The camera showed a man at the gate with a clipboard. He smiled into the lens and said he was a family psychologist and wanted to stop by for a short check-in to help me feel supported after a big life change. He had no appointment. He had my first name wrong. He asked if I could spare 10 minutes. My hand stayed still on the counter. This visit is not on my calendar. I spoke through the intercom and asked the man to show an email from me or from my attorney. He could not. He said my name wrong and smiled into the camera. I saved the clip with the timestamp and called Rachel. She told me to document everything and not to open the door. I set a sealed envelope on the entry table where I could see it and said through the speaker that I already had a fresh evaluation of my decision-making from an independent doctor and a video record of my wishes. I read the doctor's name and the date. The paper inside carried an embossed hospital seal that caught the light when I tilted it. I told him I did not need a visit and that any future contact must go through my attorney. He started to talk about how 10 minutes could help. I ended the call and watched him leave the gate. I scanned the report and forwarded it and the door clip to Rachel. She sent a cease and desist to the name on his card and to the person who had referred him. A text from Bob followed that afternoon saying guardianship could be a kindness when someone was under stress and that the court could help me feel less burdened. Linda called to ask if I was sleeping and to repeat the name of the same doctor. I used one sentence. For anything about money or decisions, please work through my attorney. The next day, Rachel scheduled a meeting in her office with the independent advisor Tessa had pushed. She said Bob was welcome to join if he wished. The room was quiet and bright. Rachel began by sliding a short form across the table and asked the advisor to sign a fiduciary commitment and to list every fee and any kickback he received. He reached for a different folder and started a soft pitch about a family strategy. I mirrored his calm and tapped my phone to share his email on the wall screen. The header filled the glass. The CC field showed Bob Brooks and Tessa Brooks. I slid to the fiduciary form and let the cursor rest in the signature box that blinked on and off. Here, independent means no CC, I said. Sign this, or we stop. He asked to call Tessa to confirm his scope. Rachel ended the meeting. Outside the room, I saved the audio from my phone and mailed it to myself and to Rachel. We filed the screenshots and the clip from the door and my written log with dates and exact phrases. Rachel updated my trust language to state that anyone who pressures me or conspires to pressure me about my estate is excluded. She also drafted a motion to dismiss ready to file if anyone tried a guardianship petition without cause, along with a request for sanctions for misuse of the process. We walked through my security notes again. My banks already had 2-factor and voice print and a clear note that no power of attorney or third-party authority would be accepted unless confirmed through Rachel. We called to confirm those notes and asked the rep to read them back. I kept my credit reports frozen at all 3 bureaus, and my phone carrier had a lock on SIM changes. Nina stayed listed as a trusted contact with no right to move money. If rumours started, Rachel kept a single sentence ready for me to use, and only if needed. I am fine and I have legal representation. No more. No online fights, no comments. That evening, I sat in my kitchen and put the sealed envelope back into a drawer. The room was still. The air unit made its steady sound. I felt the place where my breath settled in my chest and noticed it was lower than it had been a week ago. The plan did not make me loud, it made me clear. I typed one line and sent it by text and email to every person who had tried to steer me this week. From now on, please work with my attorney. I sent that line to every number an email that had tried to steer me this week, then turned on Do Not Disturb and set my phone face down. The binder sat closed on the shelf. In the morning, I met Rachel to sign an amendment to the trust. The new page said that anyone who pressures me, gossips to push me files, bad faith papers, or tries to slide in a power of attorney will be excluded forever. Rachel added a red tab. The rings clicked shut. We called my banks one by one from her office. I turned on two-factor by text and by voice. I enrolled a voice print where they offered it and set a passphrase that only I know. I removed an old backup number and added an email I use only for banks. Each rep read back the internal note that said no outside power of attorney is valid unless confirmed through Rachel Ortiz. I wrote the time and the name of each rep in my notebook. After that, I froze my credit at the 3 bureaus and requested a fraud alert. Each bureau sent a confirmation with a case number and a PIN. I printed the emails and tucked the small numbers into the binder. I called my phone carrier and put a PIN on the account. I asked them to lock Paul out and to block any SIM change unless I showed up in person with ID. Later that day, a text popped up that said, "Attempted SIM change denied." I took a screenshot and saved it to my log. At home, I cleaned up my accounts. I changed each password to a unique one and added passkeys where I could. I moved two-factor from text to an app and printed backup codes and slipped them into the safe. I checked my list of logged-in devices and signed out of the ones I did not recognize. I set a small note to review this list on the first Monday of each month. I called a locksmith to change the cylinders and the keypad code. I checked the door camera and the motion alerts. I rented a P.O. box and moved my important mail there. I bought a small shredder and ran old envelopes through until I had a clean bin. Originals went to the safe deposit box, and copies stayed in a folder at home. Rachel drafted a boundary letter, and I met a notary to sign it. The letter said money conversations must go through one email address only that her office monitors. It said no visits without a scheduled time and written confirmation. It said that uninvited contact at my home would trigger a formal warning. We mailed certified copies to Linda, Bob and Tessa and kept the green slips. I set up the shared alias email with Rachel and moved all family threads there. Anything outside that channel would get no reply. On my phone, I blocked every number that had pushed at me this month and turned on the filter for unknown callers. The blocked list ran long. I created an interaction log on my computer with folders by date. Screenshots went in with short file names that made sense. Audio and video clips had the time in the name. I shared view only access with Rachel so she could point to anything quickly if she needed to. I wrote out a short protocol for myself and taped it by my desk. I do not sign anything outside the law office. I do not send ID scans by email. I keep a white list of approved recipients at the bank for transfers, and I keep limits low. I check balances and statements at the same time each week, and then I log off. When the chores were done, I cooked something simple, walked the block, and sat for 15 minutes with my breath slow and even. The house was quiet. The door closed with a soft sound when I tried it. My phone stayed still on the counter. One day passed, and then two, without a call I did not expect. No surprise emails. Only a calendar reminder for the Harbour House lease meeting next week. The quiet felt good, and also a little strange, like a space before a change I could not name. That night, I ate at the small table by the window. The chair across from me stayed empty. The air unit hummed its even sound. I finished a bowl of soup and set the spoon down metal on porcelain soft and quick. My phone buzzed and showed Nina. She spoke in a lower voice than usual and said she had heard things about Tessa. A hotel group had pulled a project after a tense meeting. A developer followed. The story was the same each time. She talked over people snapped when they pushed back and used names like they were trophies. I listened and said I was sorry it was a mess for everyone. I did not say more. After we hung up, I wiped the table with a small cloth and looked at the quiet chair again. It did not ask me for an opinion. The next day, another call from Nina. She had run into someone at the market who knows my mother and Bob. They are staying home more, fewer visitors. The big house feels bigger when it is just two people and a lot of framed moments. Nina said it gently. I thanked her for telling me and asked about her day. When the call ended, I made a sandwich and took one bite and put it down. Not because I felt guilt, not because I felt relief, just because the food felt like food. I turned to the next thing on my list. Harbour House. The landlord had sent a clean draft of the lease. I drove to the small strip near the bus line. The space was plain, one open room and a small back office with a sink. No stairs. The floor was concrete and showed lines from earlier tenants. The agent met me with a folder. Terms were simple. 12 months with an option to renew for another 12. 1 month deposit. The landlord would paint and replace the ceiling lights with simple bright fixtures. I would handle furniture and equipment. Insurance needed to send a certificate of insurance before keys. I asked about early morning access and evening classes. He said fine as long as we kept the noise low. We sat at a folding table. I read each page. I asked 2 questions about the right to assign if we outgrew the space and about the window signage size. We wrote both into the lease. I took out the pen I carry now and signed. The tip made a small scritch that I felt in my hand. The agent signed and handed me a set of photocopies and a short receipt for the deposit. I scanned the signed pages to Rachel when I got back to the car and transferred the deposit from the whitelist account. Then I called my insurance and requested the certificate. They emailed it by the end of the day, and I forwarded it to the agent. I stood in the empty room once more and walked it like a student would. A row of light tables on the left, a whiteboard on the front wall, a small rolling cart with a kettle and paper cups, a corner for 2 laptops and a printer. I marked a few spots with painter's tape for outlets and tables. The sound of my shoes on the floor echoed a little and then faded. It felt like a start that belonged to many people, not to me alone. Back at home, I sent an email to the director at Harbour House. We signed the lease. Target first group is 10 to 12 people. Resume, basics. Simple, tech. Money talk without jargon. Stipend for childcare. I can be there 2 nights a week to start. She wrote back yes, and thank you, and we will bring a small team to help set up on Saturday. I made tea and sat on the floor with my back to the wall. The last light left the floorboards in a slow line. I set my pen on the notebook and watched the ink dry in a thin trail. The air unit kept its steady sound from morning to night. I took a photo of the empty space with tape marks and sent it to Nina. We signed. Small and enough, I wrote. She sent back a short reply. Good. Proud of the quiet kind. I cleaned the counter, checked the door camera, and turned off the kitchen light. The microwave clock moved to the next minute. In bed, I scrolled through the lease again, and the email from insurance and put the phone down. My calendar pinged once. Key pickup scheduled for tomorrow at 10. I nodded in the dark as if someone could see it. Tomorrow, I get the keys. Morning came clean and bright. The agent met me at the space and set a small ring on my palm. The metal felt cold, then warm. I unlocked the door, and the smell of fresh paint met me. Light ran across the floor in a long band. I opened the windows and turned on the fan. I rolled in a cart with a kettle paper cups and a tin of ground coffee. I lined up 2 rows of folding tables, set out 12 chairs, wiped the whiteboard, and taped an extension cord along the wall so no one would trip. On the sign in table, I placed name tags, pens, a short form for childcare stipends, and a one-page scholarship list labelled by simple codes. The first woman arrived early holding a tote and looking around like she was not sure she was in the right place. "You are," I said. She wrote her name in slow letters and took a seat by the window. More came. 2 friends from the same shelter program. A man between jobs who wanted basic tech skills, a mother with a stroller, and a baby who slept through the morning. A volunteer stood near the back door where the childcare area was set up and handed the mother a small envelope with the stipend. The room settled into a soft hum. I stood by the door and opened it wide to let the ocean air move through. "Here, we do not need permission to be good enough," I said. Heads lifted. A few people smiled. We started with resumes. I showed a plain template and we wrote strong verbs on the board. We talked about dates and numbers that tell a true story. One woman rewrote her summary so it said what she had actually done, not what she hoped someone would guess. She read it out loud and we clapped once and moved on. In the next block, we opened laptops. We made simple email addresses for people who still used the ones they set up long ago. We created a clean signature line. We turned on 2-step verification for their main accounts. Each person sent a test email with a resume attached to the class inbox. They watched it arrive on the projector a second later and laughed at how fast it felt to do something clearly. After a short break, we talked about money without any big terms. What comes in? What goes out? What must be set aside first? I handed out a single-page checklist they could fold into a wallet. We talked about a weekly time to open the bank app, write a line in a notebook and close it. No lectures, just small steps. The room felt lighter with each pass. Coffee from the kettle filled the air with a steady scent. The sunlight moved across the floor and changed the angle of the shadows under the tables. On the side wall, a small board held the scholarship codes. People stood by it to read and then returned to their seats quietly. During the final half hour, a phone buzzed on one table. A woman looked down with wide eyes and then up at me. "Interview invitation," she said, "for a receptionist job at a clinic." She had sent her resume during the tech block. We clapped again, and she put the phone face down and took a breath. Another woman asked me to look at a weekly schedule for 2 part-time jobs. We moved a few blocks around so she could sleep between shifts. It fit. She nodded and drew a little box around the word sleep. At noon, we wrapped. People filled out a short feedback card and signed up for office hours next week. We stacked chairs, wiped the board, and rinsed the coffee pot. A volunteer rolled up the painter's tape and put it in a drawer. I took a photo of the room with the light on the floor and texted it to Nina. We opened. "Small and steady," I wrote. She sent back, "You did it," and a little line about how the room looked like it could breathe. I locked up, checked the door twice, and walked to my car. On the way home, I stopped for paper towels markers and a new power strip. The normal act of paying felt like part of the work. Back at the house, I set the bag on the counter and checked the door camera out of habit. Nothing new. I carried the bag to the hallway and turned toward the front door when I saw it. A handwritten envelope lay on the mat. No name on the front. Thick paper. Firm seal. I stood for a moment and looked up and down the quiet hall. No one there. I picked it up and balanced its weight in my hand. I did not open it. Not yet. I did not open it. Not yet. I locked the door, set the grocery bag on the floor, washed my hands, and poured a glass of water. I put my phone face down on the table and watched a small ring of condensation form on the wood. The kitchen light was warm and steady. I slid a thumb under the envelope flap and pulled the paper free. Thick, stock-careful cursive I knew before the second line. It was from Linda. The first paragraph said she was sorry if I felt hurt, that it was never her intention, that mothers say the wrong thing when they worry. The next line said, Family has always done what is best for me, that I may have misunderstood that the dinner had been a shock. She wrote that we should start again soon and that it would make sense to sit down and talk through a plan together. The words did not shout. They did not own what happened either. I read them once, then again, slower. I did not pick up a pen. I did not text Nina. I held the page at its corner and let the air move it a little. The air unit hummed from the hall. I thought about older versions of myself that would have rushed to explain, to defend, to soften. I did not feel that pull now. I checked my breath, and it was even. This was not a debate I needed. I folded the letter into 3 parts, lined the edges with my fingertip, and stood on a chair to reach the shelf where I keep my small box of papers. I set the letter inside next to copies of my trust and the receipt for the Harbour House lease. The lid clicked home. I took a quick photo of the letter before I folded it and saved the image in a dated folder on my laptop, then closed the screen. No reply. No forward to Rachel. There was nothing legal to solve here. I made tea and stood by the window with it cupped in both hands. The city lights were soft and far, a thin line above the dark. I cracked the window and heard the ocean from somewhere down the street, a faint sound with no shape, just a presence. I thought about my mother in her house and the rooms that have held so much talking. I thought about how long I tried to fit my edges to their outline. I let the thought pass without sticking to it. I rinsed the cup, wiped the counter, and set my phone on the charger face down. I turned off the kitchen light and the room shifted to the blue of the street outside. I walked the hall and paused in the doorway of the bedroom and listened to nothing. The house felt like it was breathing at a slow, safe pace, and I matched it. I wished them well without needing to prove it. I checked the lock and went to bed. Tomorrow I will pick up chairs for the class and set a schedule for office hours. Life moves in simple tasks, and I am ready for those. I do not need to win. I need to live. I closed my eyes and let the quiet sit where the noise used to be. I no longer shrink myself to fit anyone.